Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 94 of the Hammer Territory podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you deep in the night here on October 2nd into October 3rd. And I'm joined, as I always am, by Scott Coleman. Scott, the 2024 season for the Braves is now over, and in a lot of different ways, as we'll talk about, it was quite fitting, I thought.
Hey, Brad. Yeah, it's baseball is a poetic game, and tonight's game, in so many ways, was poetic of this season. Some highs, some lows, really a lot of lows. And here we are, man. Anytime we get to the end of the road with the Atlanta Braves, it's a bummer. I think this team deserves credit for at least getting to the playoffs with everything they had to deal with this year. And rest assured, it was a lot. But that was very disheartening to watch the last two nights. And unfortunately now we have 5 or 6 months without Atlanta Braves baseball, and that is never a fun thing.
It never is. And if you are unfamiliar with our show, first of all, this is quite an episode to begin with. But perhaps you've joined us for the first time tonight. We are part of the Foul Territory network of podcasts. Shouts to those guys. We are very happy to be at Foul Territory. We joined during the season. We're thrilled with that partnership, and check out the entire network of podcasts. And please subscribe to this show at Hammer Territory. You can find us on Apple and Spotify and Overcast, etc. We're also on YouTube, where you can see Scott and I in shining, maybe HD. I don't know if this is HD or not, but we're there in video form if you want to find us. And we'll obviously paint the picture a little bit. If the Braves had come back and won this game, we might have done our more traditional, almost line by line breakdown of this one. I think we're going to largely eschew that given the end nature of this one. But in the end, Scott, this is a loss that is complicated to talk about, in that in March, if you just told you and I'll speak for you a little bit. You can correct me if you want to. If you told us back in March the Braves were going to be swept in the wild card round of the playoffs, that would have been a kind of shocking result. And also, why are they in the wild card round? We would have had lots of questions about that. But then if I ask you this, like a couple of weeks ago, or even 6 weeks ago, if you gave this result, it would have been far less shocking. And, we could at least frame it this way. The Braves made the playoffs in what was largely a disaster season. And I think that I received a lot of feedback from people that I trust around the sport, that follow other teams or national writers or whatever, that were kind of like more in the amazement camp. And I know no one wants to hear that, and I promise we're not going to dwell on the positive tonight, I can assure you. But there is a framing. It's like, okay, what did you kind of expect by the end? Is kind of it's been interesting to see the reaction from the typical anger, and people can express whatever they want to. I get it. I felt all of those things in the last few days, I assure you. But I had a hard time personally, and I will admit this now, rationing up the anger level, because I just, if they had expectations, I would have been a lot more hot and heavy. And in the end, it was just kind of like resignation that this team was just not going to be able to do what they thought they were going to be able to do for many reasons.
Yeah, I felt like anything this team did in October was the cherry on top. I don't know if folks heard it in Brad and I's tone a couple nights ago when we previewed the series, but I don't think either of us were super confident that the Braves were going to go in and beat a very good and very hot San Diego Padres team. And could they have won the series? Sure. Baseball, it's a funny game. We're going to talk about tonight's game in particular, where other than one disastrous inning, they really did not play that poorly. But I agree wholeheartedly with everything that has gone on over the last 6 months, from the injuries to the bad luck to the bad performance and everything in between. I think it was hard for me to feel disgust or just true anger. And that's not always the case when the Braves season ends. I had a bad taste in my mouth for days in 2019 when they choked that series away to the Cardinals. And in 2020, even though it was the weird COVID year, blowing a 3-1 lead to the Dodgers was painful. And the last 2 seasons, getting beat up and thoroughly beaten down by the Phillies in back-to-back years, even as the favorite, even as the home field advantage, even though they had 10 plus more wins in the regular season. That's stuff that really bothers me, and I think sticks with you as a fan. But this series, man, of course I wanted the Braves to win, but I am not sitting here in anger or disgust or anything like that. They lost to a better team, and hey, I would have loved to have seen that series with a healthy Ronald Acuna Jr., a healthy Chris Sale, a healthy Austin Riley. I mean, what are you supposed to do at the end of the day? And I guess it's just kind of the way the dice rolls sometimes.
For sure. And, I would, if you didn't say that, I was going to. This 2024 season is not that, as far as what you just laid out with the other previous years. I think that aside from the Valhalla season of 2021, which we kind of tug in cheek, even in the moment, if you were listening to us back then at Talking Chop and also at Battery Power, we even kind of jokingly and not jokingly said that was probably their worst team of this entire run. They won the fewest games, and that's one of the things about baseball that is both maddening and poetic in some ways. It's a interesting sport in a lot of different ways, and we love the sport.
Yeah.
But other than that, the 4 times before this, the Braves have lost in maddening, infuriating, disappointing, frustrating fashion to in different ways, blowing leads or just being blown out the last 2 years. And I am confident, and this makes total sense to me too, that some of the negative reaction today in particular is magnified by the fact that it's the 3rd year in a row that they've lost in the first series. And context, we're big on context. We're big on nuance on this podcast, and that's not always going to go over well. I get that. And we'll tell you, we already told you this is different, but I do understand the reaction when it's the 3rd straight season when you don't win a playoff series. And they've now gone 2-8 in the playoffs the last 3 years combined to lose 3 series. And they've also lost 6 consecutive elimination games in a row. Ironically, they never had an elimination game in 2021. They were always ahead of the curve and they never got there, but they just don't seem to be able to do this. And I have to give my stat of the season that I know Steven's been doing every podcast, and so have we. Fittingly today, the Braves allow 4 runs or more in their clinching loss, and they finish 11-60 when giving up 4 runs or more, which I believe, I think Sean pulled this, is like the worst record for a playoff team in like 100 years. Like, it's amazing the Braves made the playoffs. Again, we'll say that. And I know, again, no one wants to hear that. But it is just different. But also, I do understand fully the reaction, because every bad season, there's this, was it Bill Simmons? Whoever coined the 5-year halo effect or whatever it was after you win a title. I get that, because, look, they won the World Series 3 years ago. It's not like there's a curse that's happening here. It's not like it was a cursed season in some ways, to be sure. But when it's 3 years in a row, you don't win a playoff series, and you have these level of expectations, even with all the qualifiers, that does feed on each other. And I get the reaction as a result.
Yeah, I do too. And as we know, as fans know, this team was close for years and just couldn't break through. And then they finally did it in 2021. And sometimes when you taste the euphoria and finally get there for that World Series, it had been, 25 years since they had won one. It's hard to then not expect greatness every single year. And I mean, look, man, it sucks for the Braves, but baseball, it's a tough game. It is so difficult to navigate 162 games and a month-long playoff and come out at the end with a championship. It's why you can never diminish winning a title, as the Braves did a few years ago. And I mean, look around baseball, even today. For the 2nd year in a row, the Baltimore Orioles, who were just awesome all regular season, back-to-back seasons, got beat up in the playoffs once again.
They scored in almost Braves fashion. They scored 1 run in 2 games combined,
and it was the same way it was the same way last season too, with a very good offense. The Houston Astros got crushed by the Detroit Tigers this week. We know. I mean, the Dodgers have maybe had I believe the Dodgers have the most wins since 2015 or 2016. They have 1 COVID World Series to show for it, and a whole bunch of early playoff exits too. The New York Yankees, I mean, I could go on and on and on here. And I think the point I'm trying to say is, even if everything goes right for you in a season, and clearly it did not go that way for the Braves in 2024. I mean, quite literally, everything that could go wrong basically went wrong, other than a couple of players who emerged out of nowhere to step up. Even if everything goes right, it's really hard to do. And clearly, as we just watched and talked about for the last 6 months, this was a year where the Braves just could not get ahead. They could not catch a break on the injury front. And even in this second game of this best of 3 series, they ran into some brutal luck, both on the pitching side and defense, and then offensively as well. It wasn't the Braves' year, and that sucks. I promise you guys, me and Brad would so much rather do these shows after a Braves postseason win. But for so many reasons, it just was not in the cards this year.
Absolutely, and it was a shell of the team we expected it to be, personnel wise, and performance wise too. Not everything, and we've been sure to say that every time we point out the injuries, and they are real, and they do amaze people that are not following the Braves closely. Like, how are they still good? Yes, but also they underperformed what they could have done even with the injuries, and in a lot of ways, at least on the hitting side of things, as we'll talk about even more on this podcast and much, much more going into the winter. And also, if you see a man, if you're not watching on YouTube and you've never seen me or Scott in person, if you hear someone just muttering 11 and 60 to themselves on the streets of Atlanta, it might be me. Just saying. Might be me.
It is.
Or it's Steven, who's in town. One of us is probably muttering 11 and 60 under their breath for the next, 4 months or so.
Yeah, to go 11 and 60 when the opponent scores 4 runs is, and especially everything we knew from last year with just how good and historic the lineup was. And, I will say, I know longtime listeners of the show know this, but we do not go away when the offseason comes around. We will probably take a little bit of maybe a mental breather the next couple. No, just keep going.
No breathers. Scott, we don't take breathers on the Hammer Territory podcast.
We're hardened podcasters. But no, I mean, in all seriousness, we will do a deep dive on everything that went right and everything that went wrong, which was a lot, in the coming weeks. And of course, shift into off-season mode because it's a big and busy, presumably busy off-season ahead. But for tonight, I know people said, we got to talk about shortstop. We got to talk about the rotation. Is Max Fried gone? Is Charlie Morton gone? We are not going to do that tonight at the risk of turning this into a 3-hour show. Deep, we are past midnight now on the East Coast. But yeah, it is. Despite everything this season, there were some really great moments, some genuine moments of happiness. And I think, again, the team deserves a lot of credit for fighting and never giving up, despite losing its top 3 players, top 4 players, and then pick a couple others to be on the injured list at any given time. But make no mistake about it, it sucks when your season ends, especially the way it ended the last couple of days.
Yeah, and we will touch on some of the stuff that you touched on. We're not going to dive in for that reason. There's so many topics, and I get it. I recoil at the sight of 2025 questions in our mentions, and I understand. Jump in there. I promise you I do. But we do have to talk about the team in more depth moving forward, and we will. I assure you on that. With that said, after a quick break, we will dive into what happened today and also in the playoff series, probably with not a insane amount of depth for just our psyches and all of that stuff. But first, a quick break to hear from our sponsors. All right, Scott, let us go through this game in some detail of some kind. The first inning went well. I'll say that. Yeah. The Braves did score first. I will. It's funny. Michael Harris doubled. Michael Harris was probably the singular bright spot in this series. He was fantastic. Great to see Mike after, and we said this, like, it was outlier bad in a way that it just doesn't make sense. Like, his first 2 playoff runs / series, I think he was 1 of 27, like comically bad. And it was never like Michael Harris can't hit in the playoffs. It just was 2 series. It was what it was. And he broke out this time around. But anyway, he doubles. He comes around to score with some ABC baseball. And then on the bottom half, Max Fried, maybe we should have known, Scott. They load the bases without the ball leaving the infield in the bottom of the first. Max gets hit with a line drive in the middle of that. Plus, he also made a mistake throwing the ball to second base on a tapper back to him, all that stuff. But he gets out of it, gets a strikeout, ground balls, and looks like, and my mention said this too, and I thought the same thing. When that happens, you feel like, all right, Max is about to dial in, and we're going to be in not smooth sailing, but you know what I mean? Like, we're in good shape here, dodge the bullet, here we go. Fast forward to the second inning, and that is when the disastrous struck to the point where the Padres came to the plate 8 times in this game. They scored in exactly one of those innings, and they won the game 5-4. So it all happened in the second inning, and it all happened with 2 outs.
And 2 strikes to Kyle Higashioka, who, no disrespect to Kyle, but I mean, this is not Mike Piazza in his prime, who just
you have been practicing that pronunciation since what time today? When was the first time you said that name out loud?
I did pay special attention to the ESPN broadcast because I wanted to make sure I had that one right.
Nailed
it. I will say it's the first time we have mentioned Kyle Higashioka's name on the show, and probably the last. But second inning, all's well. I was concerned at the time that maybe Max wouldn't be able to go back out there because he got hit in the butt or in the side.
Drilled. Maybe the hip area. And just we are recording this immediately after the game. I have not seen an update on Max. Not that they're going to be in a hurry because they're, of course, done playing now. But Snicker did say an inning or two later on the broadcast of one of those, I would say, normally intolerable mid-game interviews that I absolutely hate. But we did learn from Snit that Max, I don't know if that was the reason he came out, but it was a reason he came out of the game, is that he was bothered by that still, which kind of maybe ask the question, how long was he bothered? Was he adrenaline the rest of the first inning? Was he in pain? We'll never maybe know that, but he at least had some effect of that liner off of himself, which, by the way, Max is kind of cursed in the playoffs recently. He had the sickness when he lost like 15 pounds in like a week. Remember that? Even when he had the famous World Series clinching gem, he almost had to leave the game. Like, it's just something every year with Max.
Yeah, he had the blister last year.
Yep.
A week before, maybe 2 weeks before the playoffs, they shut him down, and then they tried to ramp him back up for game 1, and or maybe game 2, and he just clearly didn't have it. And tonight, again, man, 100-mile-an-hour line drive from Fernando Tatis right to his hip. That bruise tomorrow morning is going to be gnarly.
Yep.
But second inning felt like it was going okay. Again, 2 quick outs, harmless outs, and then 2 strikes. 2 strikes, gives up the homer. And then what was it, like 5 hits in a row or something like that?
Yeah, it ended up being 5 hits in a row. And here's the money stat. The Padres had 4 infield singles and a fielder's choice in which a player reached in the first 2 innings. 4 infield singles in 2 innings of baseball. And I already heard it from people to say, guys, don't say they're unlucky. Don't say it. We don't want to hear that. Look, Max then, after that, got drilled a couple times. It wasn't like he was perfect in the inning. I'm not saying that. But there were 4 chances in that inning to get out with minimal damage, whether it be up 1-0 or tied 1-1, and none of that happened because of little things here, little things there. Runner gets in the way, balls, just little things that like happen in baseball games, and you can't predict baseball. That's fair, but also if you simulate that inning 100 times, they don't score 5 runs very often. Let's just say that.
Yeah. I mean, it was just one of those things. Again, kind of fitting for the 2024 season that has been.
Oh, very.
I tweeted in the moment. I think at that time there had been 3 infield singles and the fielder's choice, and I tweeted, maybe this is like the baseball gods' way of telling us it's time.
We're all done. We're all done here.
And then 30 seconds later, there was the 5th ball where someone reached without getting out of the infield. And it was like, dear God, here we go. Then Manny Machado lines a ball to left. Jackson Merrill, who was awesome, then I think tripled or whatever he did. And I mean, the game, maybe it wasn't over.
It wasn't over. It felt over. It felt over. And I know, like, we'll talk about a little bit of the comeback attempt, and the Braves had chances. I'll ask you this. In the moment, I think I know the answer. It felt over to everybody, I felt like. And look, I'm not the it's over guy. In fact, I'm usually the opposite. Like, I'm the very rational, long way to go, baseball's weird guy. And in my mind, I'm thinking this is over. At 5-1, with the way this season's gone, all joking aside, the 4-run stat is funny, but they were 11-59 coming into the year, coming into the night, allowing 4 runs or more. and became 1160, it didn't feel like it was over, but like I thought it was over. I really did. At 5-1, I'm like, I'm tweeting like the series is over. I never said it was over. I never said it out loud or typed it, but I thought it was over at that point for the most part.
It felt like it was very much on life support. And I mean, sure, maybe as a fan, deep down, you'll never give up on the team until there's 3 outs in the 9th inning. But it felt like a large hill to climb. And maybe this is a good opportunity to say the Braves bullpen in these 2 games pitched its ass off, like full stop.
Correct.
I mean, you cannot say enough good things about this bullpen, which just had to cover 18 innings 2 days ago in the doubleheader. And I mean, it was a fantastic effort from every single guy who came out of the bullpen in those 2 games. They gave the Braves a chance. And I think our co-hosts, Steven and Sean, did a great job on whatever night it was, recapping game 1, just talking that it was hardly, for all the discussion and debate over who should start the game and all of that, at the end of the day, the pitching staff, the bullpen in particular, did its job. And man, it was the bats. Once again, it was fitting in a season where the pitching, really since day 1, despite losing Spencer Strider, despite losing AJ Minter, despite the handful of injuries to basically everybody else at some point, the pitching was always fantastic, and it gave the Braves a chance to win basically every night, and has been the case as evidence of that stat. Whenever the other team scores 4 runs, the offense just could not pick them up, even if they did try to make it interesting later on in the game.
Yeah, one thing that we'll talk about a lot more later this month and into the winter is just how good the pitching was all year long. And that is the reason the Braves were able to get into the playoffs, is because they arguably had the best pitching staff in the major leagues this season. There are stats that would tell you that. If you did Fangraphs WAR, I believe they finished number 1 in the league in Fangraphs WAR for pitching staffs. That's not the end all be all, but at the very least, they are a top 3 or 4 staff in the entire major leagues this year. And we thought they were going to be good coming into the year, to be fair, but not this good. No one was projecting the Braves to be the best staff in baseball from top to bottom, rotation, etc. And they were fantastic. And obviously the starting pitcher, which Sean and Steven covered yesterday, that did not go very well. Max had a rough one tonight, even though it wasn't like all noise. But the bullpen was just absurd. I mean, the fact that they got through 6 innings today of scoreless baseball gave them a chance, is the great way to put it, kept them at 5. They didn't even have to use Raisel Iglesias. That was the first 5 innings. We're not even their best guys. I mean, I know Dylan Lee pitched today and he's great, but like, it wasn't like they were throwing Raisel for 2 and Joe Jimenez for 2. Like, it was Joe in the 8th. So shouts to them. That was fantastic. They kept him right there. The middle of the game, Soler hits a home run that was like, all right, little sparkle. It's 5-2 in the 5th. The one that I still will be circling when I think about this game is the 6th inning, where the Braves did not score, and they threatened to, and they sent 5 guys to the plate in the 6th. All of them hit the ball hard, all 5. All 3 outs in the inning were struck off the bat at 99 miles an hour or higher. The 3 outs in the inning. Matt Olson hits a 103-mile-an-hour rocket that is a double a lot, let's just say. And it wasn't. And that was on brand as well. That was a threat. And another time in this game, which I will raise my hand and say I thought it was over when they didn't score there, down 3 runs. They threatened again in the 7th. They did score in the 8th, bringing it back to Michael Harris, who has been great for so long now, 3-4 weeks. But then even when Harris hits the home run, there's nobody out in the inning in the 8th inning. And you have your 2, 3, 4 coming up, and they go down in order. And it's like, oh, that brings us to the bottom of the order. And look, how do you want to frame this? I think that it's fair to point out, and I did it before the 9th inning on Twitter, the 3 players coming up in the inning in the 9th, in the due-up box on ESPN, were not in the organization 2.5 months ago. And only one of them was they traded for Jorge Soler. Jorge Soler is obviously a real bat that they went out and proactively got and spent money on and all that stuff. But the other 2 guys that were due up were Ramon Laureano, who has been great for the Braves, to be fair, and Gio Urshela, who did his job. Those guys were scrap heap signings. And they're coming up for you in the ninth inning of the biggest game of the season. Your season's on the line. And it's not their fault by any means, but that was another small indicator of like what has happened, like how they possibly got here. And I don't know what you want to get into about this, but like even this, Soler hits an absolute rocket, like 109 mile an hour, literally 109 mile an hour rocket. Yeah. And it's a nice catch by the center fielder. And it's like, if that falls, if it's 5 feet to the left, it's a leadoff double. And we joked before we started recording that I'm convinced that he wouldn't have scored. Leadoff double, there's no way he's scoring there, right? There's no way.
Yeah. No, I mean, in some ways, and I tweeted this because, again, baseball is a funny game. The ninth inning was somehow a perfect microcosm of the season offensively, because this is what happened. 109 mile an hour line out. If Jorge Soler hits that baseball anyway to the left or to the right, it's a double in the gap. You have a leadoff double, tying run in scoring position to start. Okay. But Jackson Merrill makes a nice catch. So 109 mile an hour line out. Then you have Ramon Laureano, who comes up and swings at balls 4 and 5.
Yep.
And I know the baseball is coming 102 miles an hour, and you basically have no time to see it and react. But isn't it kind of on brand that the first 2 outs were a 109 mile an hour rocket right at somebody, and then a hitter refusing to take a walk against a wild pitcher, and after swinging at balls 4 and 5, Ramon grounded out pretty weakly to Manny Machado, which is basically automatic. And then Travis d'Arnaud comes up, and to be fair, coming up as a pinch hitter against a guy throwing 102 is not easy. But what does Travis do? But he swings at a first pitch that was about 1.5 feet off the plate and pops it up 20 feet away from the plate in foul territory. I mean,
yep.
Tell me that is not the season in a nutshell. A rocket ship that was caught, terrible approach at the plate where you should have walked, and then just bad baseball to come up and swing at the very first pitch when a guy clearly cannot throw strikes because he tried to walk Soler and he tried to walk Laureano. It was just a perfect poetic finish to just a season where I think we're going to look back and go, what if, on so many things. And unfortunately, the ninth inning rung out very loudly for how a lot of this year has gone.
Yeah, it's funny because usually you and I would talk about like lots of like decisions and process things in a playoff recap. And there wasn't a lot to do when you're down 5-1 and it's like everything's going as well as it can with the bullpen. I don't know if you did. I got questions right away about like why they would have Travis hit there. And I'm like, guys, he's hitting for Gio Urshela. Like, no matter what, again, shout out to Gio Urshela. He more than gave the Braves what he was supposed to give them since he arrived as a total stopgap third baseman. And I know Travis has not like had a fantastic season, but like Travis is better and more trusted at the plate. I almost tweeted in the moment, get ready for Whit Merrifield at third base, everybody, because that was what would have happened if they had tied the game or taken the lead. But yeah, I had no issues with any of it. I mean, they covered it yesterday in depth. There was obviously a lot to talk about that way, process-wise, in game one. There was really nothing, unless Max. There's no controversy in having Max Free start the game and coming out after 2 innings when he's hurt or whatever. It was just pretty straight ahead. So that's the game in itself. I mean, we talked about the bullpen. We talked about Michael Harris. I don't have that much to add. I said I wasn't going to say this. I am going to say it now that we're 30 minutes in. Only the sickos are still here, Scott. Deep down in my soul, I think the Braves, and you mentioned earlier, they didn't play badly in this game. I think the Braves probably should have won this game. That doesn't mean that I am like outraged or that it was like an 80% win probability game that they just got screwed on or whatever. I'm not saying that. But I having watched every pitch, they might have been the better team in this game. The second inning was a lot of noise. Max gets hurt. There's all the infield singles. The Braves didn't play badly today. But also, would I have picked them in game 3 tomorrow had they won today? Probably not. Could they have won Game 3? Sure, they could have won. Obviously, they would have. They could have won. But like they were going to be facing Dylan Cease, who you and I think is their best pitcher, in San Diego, with the same lineup they had today that we don't love. So, yeah, maybe it's our colleague Sean rubbing off on me with his perpetual optimism, and I love Sean. He's someone who can find the good in almost anything, and I admire that about Sean. But I think they actually probably should have won today. But also, them losing a game that they probably should have won is very 2024.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the 9th time we said it because it's so unfortunately accurate for how this baseball game went. And I do agree. I mean, San Diego offensively really didn't have anything other than the first and second innings. I mean, again, man, hats off to the Braves bullpen, which was phenomenal in the series.
They held it right there.
And even in the first and the second, it was a bunch of just unbelievable bad luck, soft ground ball after soft ground ball. And I mean, look, man, it's frustrating when a team hits a bunch of rockets right at somebody and you don't score. And then the other side hits a couple of bloopers and bleeders to nowhere, and it ends up leading to 5 runs. And again, man, San Diego, good baseball team.
They're very good. Okay,
I hope
we said this on the preview show, but I want to tee you up. We said this on our preview, you and I, that neither one of us would be surprised if they won the World Series, like the Padres. I still feel that way. I mean, they lost Joe Musgrove today, who might be hurt. He got hurt in the middle of this game, which we say out loud. I guess it doesn't matter to the Braves fans now, but their starting pitcher today, who was pitching well, went down, and maybe that's going to hurt them. But that's a very good team that the Braves lost to, and there's no shame in that. And for me, anyway, this Padres team is better than the Phillies teams the Braves lost to the previous 2 years. I think.
That's spicy.
I don't think it is. I mean, people have forgotten the Phillies teams were wild card teams too. They were not like great teams. Yeah. They got hot late, but the Phillies have not won more than 90 games in either of those 2 seasons. They had playoff success, and then this year they were really good, obviously. But like, I think I would have probably picked this Padres team personally.
Yeah,
maybe it's a hot take. I don't know.
To be clear, the Braves have run into good teams the last 3 postseasons now.
No one's going to care about that, Scott. I promise you that. Right now. I promise you right now. Someone's going to yell at us about that. It's okay.
It's the things I mumble to myself to make myself feel better.
But we did leave with the fact that it's been bad. I mean, to bring it full circle again, this is a lot of playoff failure. And I shudder to think, Scott, what the tone would be if the Braves had not won the World Series in 2021. Can you imagine if the last 6 playoffs were like this, like the last 3 have gone, and the 2 before the World Series run? It would be absolute anarchy, and justifiably so. I get it. Like,
all right, so let me ask you this, because I know there are fans who are on the extreme sides of the spectrum, but let me ask you this, Brad, because you're a nuanced man. You are level-headed. As you joke, you are dead inside from years and years of sports. But
that's true.
And this is kind of a silly question because you cannot take away a World Series from a team or a Super Bowl. You know, you hear, if they didn't win the Super Bowl 5 years ago.
Flags
no, man.
Fly forever.
You cannot play that game. But what would the feeling be if the Braves did not win? Because let's just, as a quick outline, Alex Anthopoulos takes over. They have won the division 6 of his 7 years. They have won 88 games every year. Obviously, 2020 didn't count, but I think they were on pace for 90 or so that year.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, for a team that's had World Series aspirations for maybe the last 6 seasons, let's throw out 2020 because of all the craziness and weirdness of that year. But they have advanced in the postseason 1 time in a 162-game season. And again, man, World Series, amazing. I'm wearing the YouTube folks. I got my Braves World Series champion shirt on. I'll wear this until the day I die. But it's probably at least worth a little bit of a conversation that as we sit here today, this is an organization that has advanced in the postseason 1 time over the last, we'll call it 6 normal years.
Yeah, and they did win 2 mini series in 2020. That did happen. It counts, but I'm with you. I just want to be clear for the record. But no, I I tend to think that I would probably be the person, and I know myself, I would probably be the person pointing out how noisy baseball is, and not necessarily, and maybe at least gently pushing back to the people that were ready to run Alex out of town if they had, because that would have happened. There is a certain type of fan. It's not even a judgment, that like all they care about is the playoffs, and I understand that. I'm not that way. I don't think it's healthy to be that way in baseball. You're going to just drive yourself absolutely crazy because it's so random.
In some ways, I think it is a product of the Braves' geographic location, where
that definitely helps to add it. Yes,
football and maybe even college basketball, but especially college football seasons for many of our listeners are defined by championship or bust, and I think that's probably bled over to the Braves over the years.
It could be, yeah. I'm sure that's certainly some of it, but so I'd probably be the voice in the wilderness trying to say, guys, like, let's have some context. But I also would, I'm not telling you that I would definitely feel that way. I don't think I would be the guy trying to fire Alex, because like, I think personally, and this is a philosophical thing, maybe we'll talk about on its own show at some point soon. I think your job, number one, if you're a GM in baseball and you have resources like the Braves do, is to build a team that you think is going to win the division, get in the playoffs. That's what you're trying to do every year. And there are things around that, because it's we said it last night. I mean, 2 nights ago, and we were genuine with it. It's get in the dance. That's job number one, because even a 115 win team is not a big favorite to win the World Series. It's just the way that it is in this sport. In college, speaking of college football, the best team often wins in college football because they're better. They're just better. The gap is bigger. It is now. You could say it's a shorter sample size and all that, so there's more noise there. But NBA definitely is this way, where the best team almost always wins unless they're hurt, etc. Baseball's not like that. Ask Dodgers fans; they're in the same position the Braves are. They won one World Series. So all that stuff. Yeah, I shudder to think. I said this earlier, but I shudder to think what the reaction would be, even from us. Like, we would be more negative right now. Can you imagine what the tone would be? And we are on the other side of the spectrum, generally speaking, from people that would be way more angry than us. So, yeah, there's noise there. I mean, I don't know about you. Every day, I see someone that is trying to fire Brian Snitker. Every single day.
Yeah.
And I understand. It's always the manager's fault. We've picked on Brian Snitker plenty on this podcast over the years. I'm not saying that I think he's a genius or anything like that. But you could also say, look at his record as a manager, and like, you're not going to beat that for the most part. Oh, by the way, on that topic, that's why I brought this up. He said post game from the dais tonight, as I'm reading on Twitter, that he intends to manage next year. So that was one of the questions we were going to be asking. Maybe we still are. Maybe he could get 5 days away from this and decide he's going to retire. But that was a question we were all kind of wondering: is this going to be it for Snit? He said today, pretty definitively, he intends to manage. And I think the quote was, I wish spring training was tomorrow, which is very Snit to say. Yeah. But that happened.
And I will say this, and I wanted to at least bring it up because I know it's a real thought for many, many fans, and frankly, it should be.
We listed it off at this beginning of the podcast. You can't lose this way. Not even just losing, like the way they've lost, the 3-1 lead, this last 3 series, like they've lost ugly in all these runs too. The only time it wasn't super ugly was like they lost in 2018. They lost to a better team, I thought, in the Dodgers. But that was the first year of this run. That was like the bonus year. Everything after that, when they've lost, it has been excruciating. This is probably the easiest loss to take of the 5 losses.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, 3 years in a row, they have gotten their butts kicked, like full stop. And
full stop.
I know injuries are a part of it, but every team is banged up. Every team has obstacles, and we could list off a dozen excuses. And to be clear, the injuries this year for the Braves were very legitimate, but that does not change the way they got dog walked by Philadelphia the last 2 seasons. Correct. And I think from my perspective today, and I think after a season ends, you have a lot of thoughts and reflection on a year, and we'll talk about it on the show in the coming weeks. I in no spot of my mind do I think, I don't know if Alex Anthopoulos is the guy. I don't know if Brian Snitker is the guy. But if we're having the same conversation in another year, Brad, and we're doing a post-mortem where the Braves just got their ass kicked again in the first round of the playoffs, it might be time then to have a little bit of a discussion about this organization as a whole and what they are doing and what they are not doing. And again, that's 12 months from now. Hopefully we're doing World Series celebration pods this time next year. But for today, I'm fine with it because of everything this team dealt with. No GM and manager in baseball could have navigated everything this team navigated through this year and found themselves at the top. Maybe you could argue they could have won a series or two or whatever, but I just didn't see it, especially after they lost Sale. But 2025 feels like an important season on the field, and not just regular season, but playoffs. I think they have to make a little bit of noise in the playoffs this time in a year, or it's time to probably start having a little bit of a different conversation.
Yeah, I'll be surprised if they have a season similar to this one. If Snit is back again, and that's not, and because usually it's the manager first, right? Usually. Now Snit in this scenario, Snit actually has the seniority advantage. He's been with the organization forever, all that stuff, and we don't have to go down this road a lot, but I do think that while someone in my mentions will always say injuries are not an excuse or whatever, it's a pretty good excuse this year. I don't think that there is a change coming at that level. Now, we have already teased this out, and we'll come back to it. Kevin Seitzer might be in some trouble. That might be coming. I'm not reporting that. I'm just saying that might be in some trouble, and I think Scott would appreciate that if that were to be the case. Not that you ever root for somebody to lose their job, but that's the change. I think that's pretty the obvious one for me. But I don't think that Alex is in any danger, and I have faith in Alex, and I get that he's not batting 1,000 because no one does. And yeah, would you do if you could have it all back? Would you do the Sean Murphy trade again right now? You probably wouldn't. And I'm a Sean Murphy guy. I'm going to defend Sean Murphy this winter. People are going to yell at me. That's going to happen. I can tell you that right now. And even I would probably not do that trade again as of this moment. There are things that he would not want to do again. But I have a hard time arguing against Alex's track record for the last 7 years. Like, I can't really do that. I don't have it in me. And Snit's got flaws. He always has. But his record's pretty darn good too.
And so do every other manager in baseball. Other than like maybe Bruce Bochy, who like Bochy's amazing with his results and everything like that. Dude's won 4 World Series in 12 years. And I agree. And we don't, again, I know we're getting late here.
No, we'll move on. You gave the list earlier, but there's so much to hit on. I didn't expect us to come on and say, fire Alex, fire Snit. I know people were going to do that. I get it. It's a reaction. I don't know how many people are going to think that in 2 weeks. Like the day after, the night of, people just get mad and they say things, and that's fine. I have to remind myself of that sometimes because I get frustrated by it because I'm not that way, generally speaking. But that's fine. I totally get it. People are super mad. The Braves lost. It's high intensity. Even in this, we gave all the caveats earlier about how we not necessarily expected them to lose, but like did not have the sky high expectations that we've had the last couple of years. And still, I'm watching playoff baseball, and there's the knot in my stomach. Like it's not. We all get it. We're still invested, but there's decisions. I mean, Max is a big one. That's the big free agent one. Where like everyone that we have talked to for months and months, including Buster Olney on this podcast, literally on this podcast, a plugged-in national insider who didn't even like acknowledge Max as like a chance to come back. That was a few months ago, but like everyone thinks Max is gone. We don't know he's gone, but everyone thinks he's gone. Everyone. Charlie Morton's probably going to retire, and I know that there will be a party for some people in the fan base. Maybe even you, Scott. I'm kidding.
No, never. I like Chuck. I give you a hard time with.
I know. I'm mostly kidding, but and that's not as big of a deal as Max. Don't get me wrong, but like that's another piece that they've been able to rely on for several years. It's probably going to be going away. He's probably going to retire if I had to guess right now. Ronnie will come back, but Ronnie won't probably be 100% Ronnie in April. What's this going to look like at shortstop? I mean, there's all kinds of questions they have to answer under the pressure that you lay out. Because if we're thinking there's pressure on them, imagine what they're going to feel from the general fan base that's probably a little bit more reactionary than we are. Yeah. So Alex knows. I can guarantee you Alex will do a press conference in a few days, and he's going to be like, we know it. We know there's going to be heat. This is unacceptable. And some of that's true. I mean, it's a results-based business. He might even say that exact same thing. But when you don't perform, the injuries are real. They are. And you can't explain it. I still think, and I know you still think too, as we talked about it, if you just take like a half a step back and say, what would we have projected for the Braves if we knew they weren't going to have Strider, Acuna, Riley, like Sale for the – we could do 10 minutes on this. We won't. But really, Chris Sale just doesn't pitch the last 2 weeks of the season. Like, what do we do? I mean, it's not – there's a process thing there that I will always have questions about. There's also a luck thing. Like, how many years in a row can pitching just fall apart in the last week of the season? It's insane.
Yeah.
So – I don't know, man. It's going to be – you're right, though. I'm glad you brought it up. I'm glad you brought up the conversation because it's one everyone's going to be having around the Braves. And I think that they're going to feel it, whether they want to or not. They're going to feel it after these 3 years in a row.
Yeah. Because I tell listeners or I tell you back in March that for 2 months, basically, 2 months, the Braves would be running an outfield of Jared Kelenic in center field, Adam Duvall in one of the corners, and Eddie freaking Rosario, who was DFA'd by the Washington Nationals. I mean,
oh man,
if I could probably take 10 minutes now and go over everything that went wrong. And I would say, okay, Brad, flip back the calendar 7 months. What would you say the Braves record would be? I mean,
right.
500, maybe.
It would have been worse. And I don't, this is what I actually don't care about. Like, I know we're right about this. I know we are. If you look at what the Braves had personnel-wise, based on those players' histories, they did not underperform. They didn't. I'm sorry. I understand they didn't win the division this year. But if you just look at the players that were available, when they were available, how often they were available, Scott, as good as Ramon Laureano was down the stretch, they were without controversy starting Gio Urshela and Ramon Laureano every day for weeks and weeks and weeks. And Orlando Arcia is still in the lineup. And he was supposed to be the guy who was their worst player coming into the season. And he had a year that was way worse than you would expect. No Ronnie. Riley, who's been indestructible, basically, doesn't play. So I will stand on that one for forever. I know I'm even keel, but I hope people in a couple of weeks look at the roster at least and look at the games played number on the left side of Baseball Reference and say, guys, this is not a team that was supposed to win 100 games and win the World Series. The roster they had this year was not that good. Could they have done it? Sure, they could have. The team that won the World Series won 88 games. Or 87 games, whatever it was. They didn't even win 90 games that year, and they won the World Series. So it could have happened, but this was not that good of a team. The personnel on this team by the end, especially when you include like no Chris Sale for the playoffs, again, as I laugh saying it, was not that good. It just wasn't.
Yeah. Injuries, man. I mean, you can never adequately prepare for injuries. And when the top third of your roster is basically all hurt at one point or another for any chunk of amount of time in the season, it sucks. It is what it is. It kind of felt like a lost season to me because, man, if they had a healthy Ronald Acuna Jr. and a healthy Austin Riley and a healthy Spencer Strider and a healthy Chris Sale and didn't have Ozzie Albies spend 3 months on the injured list and didn't have Michael Harris spend 2 months on the injured list and didn't lose Sean Murphy for months to an oblique and everything else, this could have been a very, very, very special baseball team, a team that would have shattered some regular season records, maybe even wins records for the franchise. And we'll just never know because since day one, again, the 5th or 6th inning of opening day was Murphy's injury. A week later was Strider's injury. A week later was Ozzie's broken toe. A month later was Michael Harris and Ronald Acuna and on and on and on. We don't have to relitigate all of it. It could have been a very different season, and it sucks that we'll never get to know just how good this team could have been because of all the crushing injuries.
And I will do my Sean Coleman impression one more time and say everything you just laid out, that team made the playoffs still. That kind of tells you for me how good they are, how good they should have been. Mm-hmm. The fact that you took off whatever number you want to say of wins above replacement or value, all those things, and they still made the playoffs. And they had to sneak in. It was drama by the end. But they won more games this year than several playoff teams did last year, the year before. It wasn't like they won 81 games and had the luckiest breaks ever to get to the playoffs. They were still a playoff-level baseball team with all of that, they ended up winning 89 games. That for me is a testament to how good they could have been, to your point. So nobody wants to hear that now. I get that, but we're trying to give you the whole picture. And I can assure you, if you're a new listener or someone who's not been familiar with our work in the past in the offseason, we have teased it, but it's going to be big picture discussions. It's going to be more granular things. Like we generally do a like position kind of review kind of series where we'll go super in depth on catchers. We'll go super in depth on the infield guys, etc. We'll talk about Rick Kranitz, I'm sure, on some podcast. We'll talk about Kevin Seitzer on some podcast. Like, we're going to do it all, and it's going to be multiple times per week, pretty much all winter long. Please subscribe to the podcast. Scott, is there anything else that you want to get out there now before we, like you said, we're not going to be doing a show every day like we were going to be planning to do in October. That's really unfortunate. We won't have that much content to talk about in October, but we're not going far. But on this kind of unofficial funeral, do we call it a funeral? Is it a postmortem? Is it a wake? What is this?
Yeah. Yes to all the above. It is closure on a very challenging baseball season. And, in terms of what I think we've kind of given all of our takes on the series, I do want to quickly say, this show launched, I believe May 1st was our first show.
We broke the Braves, is what you're saying.
We did curse the Braves because everything went bad as soon as we launched the show. But in all seriousness, we frankly had the rug pulled out from under us back at Battery Power, which absolutely sucked. We had no notice. I think they gave us a 20-minute heads up that all of our shows were being canceled, not just ours, but every show across the board at SB Nation was cut. It was like 5 days into the regular season, and it was like, what are we going to do, man? I mean, we've been doing this podcast for 6-7 years now at this point. So very, very thankful for everybody who jumped on board with us, went over to Hammer Territory. The guys and gals behind the scenes at Foul Territory are A-plus individuals. They do a great show Monday through Friday. So if you do not check it out, it's in the middle of the workday. It's a great way to catch up on everything going on in baseball. And behind the scenes, they have been so supportive of us. So a sincere thank you to them. And lastly, as Brad said, we will be here all off season long. We do the emergency shows whenever a trade or a free agent signing goes down. We'll do review. And then, when spring comes around, we'll start talking about the 2025 Braves. But until then, we promise we'll have a lot of good content and both digest the past season and then look ahead to the future.
No, it's well put. And sincere big thank you. I know you'll hear from Sean and Steven soon enough. They'll probably do their own version of a postmortem too, because I'm sure they have takes they want to get off. And that's one of those things. And the four of us work together really well, and we have fun working together. We also do this show for the listeners. Like, it's not just to hear ourselves talk. We could talk offline. So we definitely appreciate everybody listening to the show, whether you are new this season or a throwback to previous. It was a wild ride to get here, as Scott just laid out, but more to come. Thank you sincerely. And if you just found us in the last couple of days, thanks for being here too, but please go ahead and subscribe and join us all winter long. All right, Scott, I think it's time to sign it off for the 2024 season, not for the year, a calendar year anyway, but for the season on our end. I don't know when you and I will talk again. It'll be a few days. It won't be like tomorrow, but it won't be a month from now either. It's coming. I promise.
Yeah, we'll get together soon. Always fun to do these with you, Brad. As I said, we've been doing these for many years. We have seen some stuff on the show over the years. We've also gotten to do post-game reactions to winning a World Series. So take the good, you take the bad. But yes, we'll have plenty of shows coming on the audio side, wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube, if you want to see our faces. And wherever you are, we really do appreciate you tuning in, whether it's been all season long or just the last couple of days. And we will be back, and plenty of stuff on the horizon.
At some point, we'll get Sean and Steven on video too, because I know people are just like, what does Sean Coleman look like? I have so many questions. We'll get Sean on there at some point on the video side. But one more time, thank you, everybody. Follow us across the board, Hammer Territory on social media. Follow Scott on Twitter if you want to, at Scott Coleman 55. Follow me there at BT Rowland. Stay tuned, and we'll see you all next time.